Thank you for listening. This course was created to help you succeed in your educational journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional podcasts, books, newsletters, and cool merchandise await. Let's get started. Large language models introduce an entirely new category of risks that differ from traditional software systems. Their outputs are generated dynamically and often presented in ways that sound authoritative, even when factually incorrect. This creates the potential for misinformation to spread quickly and convincingly. Moreover, the integration of large language models with external tools, such as search engines, applications, or databases, broadens the possible attack surface. A model that can control external systems can escalate seemingly minor errors into more significant harms. The scale at which these systems operate amplifies both their benefits and their risks. A small bias or vulnerability in a widely deployed model can affect millions of users, magnifying consequences that might otherwise be localized. Understanding these risks is essential for building governance frameworks that can handle both the novelty and the scale of these technologies. Prompt injection is one of the most widely discussed risks in current deployments of large language models. This attack involves embedding malicious instructions within otherwise innocuous user input. Because models are trained to follow patterns of text, these hidden instructions can override intended behavior and cause the system to produce outputs that circumvent safeguards. In multi-step workflows, such as when a model retrieves data or triggers external tools, the impact of a successful injection can cascade into harmful actions. The fact that this risk is not hypothetical, but already seen in real-world systems, makes it particularly urgent. Organizations adopting large language models must assume that adversaries will attempt such attacks and must prepare both technical and organizational responses. Jailbreaking represents another persistent and evolving challenge. Users intentionally try to bypass safety filters by crafting inputs designed to trick the model into ignoring its restrictions. These jailbreaks often rely on creative or exploitive phrasing, sometimes blending social engineering with technical prompt manipulation. Because the tactics evolve constantly, static defenses rarely suffice. Every new model release spurs a wave of attempts to find loopholes, highlighting the adversarial nature of these interactions. The persistence of jailbreaking illustrates that safety mechanisms cannot be one-time fixes. They require continuous adaptation and refinement. More importantly, organizations must view this as an arms race, where governance and safeguards must evolve just as quickly as the tactics used to undermine them. Data leakage poses risks that cut to the core of privacy and confidentiality. Large language models trained on massive datasets sometimes memorize sensitive fragments, such as personal identifiers, proprietary code, or confidential documents. When probed cleverly, these memorized fragments can resurface in outputs, violating confidentiality requirements. Even anonymized data may be vulnerable to re-identification when models are queried systematically. This creates serious risks in sectors such as healthcare, finance, or government, where disclosure of private information carries legal and ethical consequences. Preventing leakage requires both careful curation of training data and rigorous monitoring of model outputs. Organizations deploying large language models must recognize that data privacy is not only a technical challenge, but also a governance obligation requiring transparency, consent management, and oversight. Hallucinations are one of the most visible and frustrating risks of large language models. These occur when the model produces outputs that are factually incorrect, yet delivered with confidence and fluency. Users unfamiliar with the limitations of these systems may treat hallucinations as truths, leading to misinformation, poor decision-making, or reputational harm. In high-stakes domains such as medicine, law, or finance, the consequences of hallucinations can be severe. While researchers continue to develop methods for reducing hallucination rates, it is widely acknowledged that they cannot be eliminated entirely. This reality underscores the importance of human oversight and the need to communicate limitations clearly to users. Hallucinations remind us that fluency does not equal accuracy and that responsible deployment requires safeguards to prevent misplaced trust. Toxicity and bias are long-standing issues that persist in large language models. Because these models are trained on vast amounts of internet text, they often reproduce harmful stereotypes, offensive content, or discriminatory associations. Fine-tuning can sometimes amplify these problems if the training data reflects imbalances or prejudices. Repeated exposure to toxic outputs erodes user trust and can cause direct harm to individuals or groups targeted by biased content. Addressing these risks requires a combination of technical solutions, such as bias mitigation and filtering, and organizational commitments, such as fairness audits and transparency in data practices. Ultimately, toxicity and bias are not just technical flaws, but reflections of societal challenges mirrored in data. Responsible AI requires ongoing vigilance to ensure that systems do not reinforce inequities or perpetuate harm. Over-reliance by users is a subtle but serious risk associated with large language models. Because outputs are often phrased fluently and persuasively, individuals may treat them as authoritative without verifying accuracy. In professional settings, this can lead to reduced critical thinking, as decision-makers substitute AI suggestions for expert judgment. Over time, reliance on models for complex tasks could erode expertise within organizations, creating systemic risks if errors are embedded in automated processes. This over-reliance is especially dangerous when AI is integrated into workflows without clear disclaimers or oversight mechanisms. Encouraging users to treat model outputs as inputs to decision-making rather than final answers is essential. Designing systems with checks and balances helps preserve human judgment and mitigates the danger of uncritical trust in machine-generated information. Tool integration risks emerge when large language models are connected to external applications or systems. While integration allows for more powerful and dynamic workflows, it also escalates the potential harms if something goes wrong. An injected or hallucinated command could trigger unintended actions, such as sending incorrect data, executing unauthorized operations, or exposing sensitive systems to compromise. The complexity of these integrations makes oversight more difficult, as responsibility becomes spread across both the AI and the tools it controls. Security risks multiply when external systems lack proper safeguards, creating cascading vulnerabilities. Organizations must implement robust guardrails, including permissions, monitoring, and human-in-the-loop checks, to ensure that integrations do not magnify risks. Without these, the promise of tool-augmented AI could easily turn into a liability. Supply chain vulnerabilities add another layer of complexity. Most organizations rely on external providers for models, data, or infrastructure, introducing risks beyond their direct control. Limited transparency into how models were trained, including data sources and filtering methods, makes it difficult to evaluate risks independently. Poisoned updates or compromised dependencies could introduce vulnerabilities into downstream systems without clients realizing it. These challenges highlight the need for contractual safeguards and due diligence in vendor relationships. Organizations cannot assume that providers have fully addressed fairness, security, or compliance issues. Instead, they must build vendor oversight into their governance frameworks, recognizing that responsibility extends across the supply chain. Without this, trust in external systems can mask hidden weaknesses that may eventually surface as significant harms. Resource consumption is another important risk, often overlooked in discussions of technical safety. Training and deploying large language models requires enormous amounts of compute power, contributing to high energy use and raising environmental concerns. At the same time, the financial costs of operating these systems at scale can be prohibitive, creating inequalities in access. Wealthier organizations or nations may benefit disproportionately, while others are excluded due to limited resources. This imbalance risks deepening global inequities in AI adoption. Addressing resource consumption requires both technical innovation, such as model compression and efficiency improvements, and policy-level considerations, such as sustainable deployment strategies. Recognizing that AI has environmental and economic costs reminds us that responsible use extends beyond fairness and security to include sustainability and equity. Monitoring challenges make managing large language models uniquely difficult. Unlike traditional software, outputs cannot always be predicted or verified in advance, making pre-deployment testing insufficient. Models evolve quickly as they are fine-tuned or updated, and even minor adjustments can alter behavior in unpredictable ways. Static evaluation methods, while useful, cannot capture the full scope of risks that emerge in dynamic, real-world contexts. This creates a need for continuous monitoring, using a combination of automated systems and human review. Monitoring must be adaptive, evolving as models and user interactions change. Without dynamic oversight, organizations risk missing emergent vulnerabilities until they cause visible harm. Monitoring is thus not just a technical requirement, but an ongoing governance responsibility. Governance complexity is perhaps the most overarching challenge of all. Determining accountability for harms caused by large language models remains ambiguous in many organizations. Are providers, deployers, or users responsible when something goes wrong? Regulatory frameworks are still catching up, leaving gaps in oversight that allow risky deployments to proceed unchecked. Internally, organizations may struggle to assign responsibility as AI touches multiple functions from product to legal to security. The rapid pace of deployment often outpaces the development of adequate safeguards. Addressing governance complexity requires clarity in roles, escalation paths, and accountability structures. Without this, the risks of large language models may remain diffuse and unmanaged, eroding trust and increasing the likelihood of systemic failures. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Evaluation techniques are a cornerstone of managing large language model risks. Red teaming, in which systems are systematically probed by adversarial experts, helps uncover vulnerabilities in prompts, outputs, and integrations. Automated benchmarks provide another layer of defense, offering standardized ways to test for safety, fairness, and bias across multiple scenarios. Continuous refinement through user feedback loops ensures that risks are not only identified once but tracked and improved over time. A blend of quantitative metrics such as error rates or demographic parity scores and qualitative assessments like case studies or ethical reviews offers the most comprehensive view. Evaluation is not static. It must evolve alongside the models themselves, adapting to new attack tactics and shifting contexts. Without robust evaluation techniques, organizations risk deploying systems blind to their weaknesses. Safeguard methods serve as practical defenses against identified risks. Reinforcement learning from human feedback, or RLHF, helps align models with desired behaviors, though it requires careful oversight to avoid embedding bias from trainers. Rule-based safety layers provide an additional shield, enforcing hard constraints even when model outputs attempt to circumvent guidelines. Output filtering systems detect and block toxic or unsafe content before it reaches users. Guardrails integrated into deployment pipelines ensure that protections are applied consistently across applications rather than piecemeal. These safeguards illustrate that responsible adoption is multi-layered. No single method suffices. Instead, organizations must combine technical, procedural, and human interventions to create resilient systems capable of handling evolving threats. Transparency approaches enhance accountability and trust in large language model deployments. Disclosure of training processes, even at a high level, helps stakeholders understand the origins and limitations of models. Communicating known weaknesses, such as susceptibility to hallucinations or biases, prevents false expectations of infallibility. Publishing safety and governance reports signals a commitment to accountability, offering evidence of oversight to regulators and the public. User education is equally important. ensuring that individuals engaging with LLMs understand both their potential and their limits. Transparency transforms AI from a black box into a system that can be scrutinized, trusted, and improved. While complete openness may not always be feasible, strategic transparency builds credibility and strengthens resilience against misuse or misunderstanding. Organizational controls anchor safeguards within a broader governance structure. Policies defining how employees can and cannot use large language models establish clear expectations. Oversight committees provide structured review, ensuring that deployments align with values and regulations. Incident reporting mechanisms create accountability, enabling rapid response when problems emerge. Continuous review of applications ensures that governance adapts as systems evolve. These controls ensure that responsibility is distributed across people and processes, not left solely to technical fixes. By embedding organizational controls, companies can institutionalize responsibility, making it part of everyday practice rather than a reactive measure. Strong organizational governance closes the gap between principles and practice. Cross-functional collaboration is critical for addressing the wide range of risks posed by LLMs. Security teams focus on injection risks and adversarial threats, while legal teams ensure compliance with regulations and prepare for potential liability. Product teams work to balance usability with safety, ensuring that security does not undermine functionality. Leadership plays the crucial role of assigning accountability and ensuring resources are available. Collaboration bridges the gaps between technical expertise, regulatory obligations, and user needs. Without it, governance risks being fragmented, leaving vulnerabilities unaddressed. Cross-functional engagement creates a holistic approach where responsibility is shared and every team contributes to resilience. This kind of collaboration transforms responsible AI from aspiration into operational reality. Ethical dimensions extend beyond technical and organizational risks. Large language models can be used to manipulate individuals, spread misinformation, or amplify inequities, raising serious concerns about autonomy and fairness. Access to LLMs also raises equity questions. Who benefits from these powerful tools, and who is excluded due to cost or policy restrictions? Respecting human oversight ensures that final decision-making remains in the hands of people, protecting dignity and autonomy. Balancing innovation with harm reduction is the ultimate ethical challenge, requiring organizations to resist the temptation of deploying new capabilities without safeguards. Ethical reflection must be an ongoing process, guiding decisions at every stage of development and deployment. Without this grounding, LLM adoption risks prioritizing capability over responsibility. Future research directions in large language model risk management focus on advancing both defensive and evaluative methods. One priority is developing more robust defenses against evolving prompt attacks, as adversaries continue to innovate beyond current safeguards. Another research focus is reducing hallucination rates without overly constraining creativity, a challenge that requires balancing accuracy with the generative flexibility that makes these models valuable. Scalable transparency approaches are also needed, particularly in creating methods for communicating risks and limitations to both technical and non-technical audiences. Finally, improving evaluation of safety metrics, especially in real-world conditions, will help organizations move beyond laboratory benchmarks to practical resilience. These research avenues underscore that LLM risk management is a dynamic field, requiring ongoing innovation to stay ahead of threats. Practical takeaways highlight the operational realities of working with LLMs. First, these systems introduce new categories of risks that cannot be managed with traditional security or compliance measures alone. Second, continuous monitoring and layered safeguards are essential to address the evolving nature of threats such as prompt injection, jailbreaking, and data leakage. Third, organizational governance structures, including oversight committees, policies, and reporting mechanisms, are indispensable for translating principles into daily practice. Finally, transparency, both to users and stakeholders, strengthens resilience by fostering trust and accountability. These takeaways remind us that responsible deployment is not a single technical fix, but a comprehensive, ongoing commitment requiring people, processes, and technology working together. The forward outlook for LLM-specific risks suggests increasing regulatory and industry attention. Governments are expected to impose stricter requirements for disclosure, safety testing, and monitoring of large language models, particularly in high-stakes domains. Defensive research will expand, as both academic and industry teams focus on developing new safeguards against adversarial tactics. Risk benchmarks are likely to gain traction, standardizing how fairness, robustness, and transparency are measured across models. Tool-assisted governance, such as automated monitoring dashboards and bias detection systems, will also become more common, helping organizations manage complexity at scale. The outlook points to a future where managing LLM risks is no longer experimental, but a formalized, regulated expectation across industries. The key points of this discussion consolidate the unique risks posed by large language models. These include prompt injection, data leakage, hallucination, toxicity, and over-reliance, each carrying potential harms that traditional AI governance was not designed to address. Safeguards must therefore combine technical defenses with organizational governance and continuous monitoring. Transparency emerges as a central principle, enabling both internal teams and external stakeholders to understand limitations and hold systems accountable. Ultimately, resilience depends on an iterative approach, where risks are continuously evaluated and mitigated over time. These key points highlight that LLMs require governance tailored to their distinct challenges, not generic frameworks. In conclusion, large language models introduce risks that are both technical and societal in nature, requiring comprehensive safeguards and governance. Prompt injection, jailbreaking, data leakage, hallucinations, and toxicity all illustrate how these systems can fail in ways that undermine trust and safety. Addressing these risks requires both defensive engineering and robust organizational oversight, supported by transparency and stakeholder engagement. The ethical and operational implications are far-reaching, reminding us that innovation must always be balanced with responsibility. As we move forward, attention will shift toward content safety and toxicity management, exploring how to build systems that not only avoid harm, but actively support fairness and inclusivity in their outputs. Thanks for tuning in to Bare Metal Cyber, your trusted source for cybersecurity educational materials, news, and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.